I love computer animation. Don't get me wrong, 2D animation as well as stop motion animation are both equally held in high regards in my book, but there will always be a special place in my heart for computer graphic imagery, CGI for short. It may be the fact that I grew up in what practically was the giant boom of CGI, the 90s. I mean, heck, in the year I was born we got special effects like Jurassic Park and the first episode of VeggieTales. And originally, this video was just me in front of the camera gushing over some CGI compilation videos, but I think I'll save those for a future VHS pile. Subscribe if you haven't, because I do adore both of those VHSs equally and have some interesting tidbits about both. But as I was researching about said videos, I came upon a slew of historical information that not even myself knew about. So without further ado, here is the visual history of computer animated imagery. Now, when someone asks you what was the first use of CGI in film, what is your answer? Could it be Toy Story in 1996?
Boys, there seems to be no sign of intelligent life anywhere. Hello?
How about Tron in 1982? Or perhaps Future World in 1976?
I have the holograph on my screen. Restructuring. Readouts normal.
Well, what if I told you that that was all still very much later down the road? In actuality, the first use of CGI was just 2 minutes in a little film that released in 1958, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. Those spirals, those were used with a combination of the rotation of an M5 gun director from World War II, which was an anti-aircraft targeting system, mounted on a pendulum to create the spirals seen in the opening intro. We fast forward almost a decade later to 1967. A 10-minute film by Charles Searcy and James Schaefer would win a prize at the 4th Annual International Experimental Film Competition of Brussels, Belgium. It would be the first example of digital morphing, which means one image seamlessly transitioning into another image. A year later, the first computer-generated cartoon would be shown off at the Cybernetic Serendipity Expedition. Simply titled Flexipede, it was created by Tony Pritchett using the Atlas Computer Laboratory near Oxford. This laboratory would be used once again a decade later to create the wireframe model renders shown in the monitors in the landing sequence of Ridley Scott's Alien. Speaking of the 70s, 1976 would be the year that Future World releases, and with it the first use of 3D computer-generated models in the form of a hand and a face.
On my screen. Restructuring. Readouts normal. Security report.
In that same year, Star Wars would also use 3D graphics for the wireframe trench run briefing scene.
Chain reaction which should destroy the station. Only a precise hit.
Other films during this time would also utilize wireframe models, such as the aforementioned Alien and Disney's Black Hole. Jumping into the 80s, 1981 would show us the first fully modeled CGI human body in the film Looker. This is when CGI really started getting its foot in the door with Hollywood, because Tron, Return of the Jedi, The Last Starfighter, and Young Sherlock Holmes would all use 3D graphic imagery to bring their pictures to life.
I recognize her.
While that was going on, a small group of animators were hard at work creating an all-CGI animated short. It would be the first to use motion blur and squash and stretch motion effects, which usually were only used for 2D animation at the time. The short was titled The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. This would be the world's first introduction to Pixar. And just 2 years later, in 1986, that same studio would get their first Academy Award nomination for their next short, Luke Sojourner. Speaking of 1986, Pixar wasn't the only company really getting into the swing of CGI. We'd see it also in films such as Flight of the Navigator, The Great Mouse Detective, and The Golden Child. Heck, Jim Henson even used it in his film Labyrinth, which in fact would be the first time a realistic animal would be rendered in CGI. CGI would make the jump to television in the 80s as well, with shows like Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future and Nightmare, both released in 1987. And CGI was not just being integrated in the US. Back in Japan, films such as 1983's Go-Go 13 and 1988's Akira were integrating it as well, with Go-Go 13 including CGI models in its opening sequence, and Akira using it as special effects throughout their film. 1988 would also see Pixar win its first Academy Award with its short Tin Toy. About a toy coming to life and being loved by their owner. That sounds familiar. We would round out the 80s with 1989. James Cameron's Abyss would be the first time water was created digitally. I wonder if this James guy enjoyed using CGI water. Jim Henson seemed to enjoy CGI as he used it extensively in his show The Jim Henson Hour with real-time effects and introducing us to the first CGI character that was digitally puppeteered, Waldo.
Wonderful. Yes. Very impressive. But I do...
Les Fables Geometriques would also air in 1989 as the first series of CGI shorts. Going right into the 90s, CGI was in full swing. 1990's Total Recall would be the first to use motion capture. Yep, before Andy Serkis used it to become Golem, and Tom Hanks used it to become... Tom Hanks. It was used on Arnold Schwarzenegger to show us how he fought in an X-ray machine. 1991 would of course show us the awesomely terrifying T-1000 in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. As well as show us the hidden world in one of the first CGI series, Quarks. Just a year later, the Henson Company would once again revolutionize the industry by being the first to use digital chroma key compositing in a feature film. As I mentioned previously, 1993 would bring us Jurassic Park. And with is the first photorealistic CGI characters, as well as VeggieTales, which would be the first complete direct-to-video series. But we also get Insectors, which would be the first fully CGI TV series, though the episodes were only 12 minutes in length. But a year later, in 1994, we get our first full half-hour show with Reboot.
I come from the net, through systems, peoples, and...
1994 would also see the first use of CGI to transform an actor into a photorealistic cartoon character with The Mask, and it would also help films be completed after an actor tragically passed away by recreating them through CGI with The Crow. 1995 would be the big year, though. First, we got Casper, which would be the first time a CGI character was the lead in a live-action film.
Catch your pants before they fall.
Then Waterworld would have the first realistic CGI water. Finally, the year would see the first full-length animated CGI film with Toy Story.
Fly?
Yes, I can.
Can't.
Can.
But the 90s were only halfway over, and CGI still had leaps and bounds to go. The very next year, we'd get Donkey Kong Country, which would be the first half-hour show to use motion capture to animate the characters. We'd also get Beast Wars, which would be the first time the robots would be in disguise in 3D. The rest of the 90s would be filled with CGI special effects, from the water in Titanic, to the bullet time effects in The Matrix, to the pod racing scene in Star Wars. And if the 90s was the great jump, then the 2000s would be the perfect landing. In 2001 alone, we'd see Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, the first feature-length film to be based on photorealism. Jimmy Neutron was the first CGI film to be made using off-the-shelf hardware and software. Before this, if someone would want to make a CGI film, they'd have to buy the license from an already made company such as Pixar with RenderMan software, or create their own practically from scratch. But Jimmy Neutron was created with Lightwave 6 for the graphics and Messiah Studio for the animation and rendering, both of which you can still purchase to this day.
Holy...
Hi! Nice antiques! Got a blast!
Shrek would be the first CGI film to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring would be the first to use AI for digital actors. 2002, we'd see Spider-Man with a photorealistic animated costume. And Ice Age would be the first feature film to use ray tracing, which from what I understand means the light reflecting off the snow and characters was realistically simulated in order to get the most accurate effect possible, something the computer could automatically figure out using a variety of algorithms instead of the animators having to figure it out frame by frame. In 2004, The Polar Express would be the first feature-length film to be created using motion capture.
Why, to the North Pole, of course. This is the Polar Express!
This, along with the aforementioned Final Fantasy, is where a lot of people started using the phrase uncanny valley, since although the characters were animated to look as real as possible, the human brain could tell that they weren't, thus giving the human characters in both films an eerie feeling to them. 2007 would see the first feature-length CGI animated film animated by just one person. The film was titled Flatland, based on the 1884 novella of the same name by Edwin Abbott, and it was animated as well as directed by Lad Ellinger Jr., and just like Jimmy Neutron, would be created by off-the-shelf animation software with Lightwave 3D and Adobe After Effects.
Edwin Abbott. Flatland.
Oh, it's just a little war.
The 2000s would wrap up in 2009 with James Cameron's Avatar being the first feature-length film to feature a fully 3D realistic world, as well as the first to use motion capture to create photorealistic 3D characters.
You should not be here. Go back.
It would also see the first computer-generated film to be nominated for the Academy for Best Picture with Pixar's Up.
Good afternoon. Are you in need of any assistance today, sir?
No.
It really is amazing how far CGI has come. From spirals and crude geometric shapes to lifelike worlds and emotional stakes. What will the next 70 years of CGI bring us? Who's to say? But I honestly can't wait for what the future will hold. Yeah, that's it. We've got 3 days until the new year. Looking forward to it. A lot of new videos. And I think I'm gonna start out the new year with a theme for the month.